cross-cultural communication. In order to be effective at cross-cultural communication, we need to familiarize ourselves with the 6 fundamental patterns of cultural differences. Okay, by learning these 6 patterns of cultural differences, we're not only going to have a better understanding of ourselves and our cultural frame of reference, but we're also going to have a better understanding of people from other cultures or people who are different from us. Okay, so these 6 fundamental patterns of cultural differences are going to be communication styles, different attitudes towards conflict, different approaches to completing tasks, different attitudes towards disclosure, different decision-making styles, and lastly, different approaches to knowing. Okay, those are the 6 fundamental patterns of cultural differences. Okay, so let's go to the first one, different communication styles. When we think about communication, we know that there are 2 major aspects to communication, and those are language usage and nonverbal communication. So when we think about how language usage differs from culture to culture, just imagine phrases and slang terms or other words that are common in our culture and how they might not translate very well to someone from another culture or another language for that matter. These are things that we need to consider when speaking to people from other cultures. We don't want to use words or phrases that are not going to mean the same thing in their culture. Now, nonverbal communication, these are things such as your facial expressions, your hand gestures, your eye contact, personal space or distance between you and the other person or other people. These are all going to be interpreted differently from people from different cultural backgrounds. These things may have different meanings to people from different cultures. In some cultures, making eye contact is seen as a sign of disrespect. In others, it shows a sign of respect. So these are things that you kind of just have to familiarize yourself with before you go and communicate with people from other cultures. You don't want to offend anyone, so make yourself aware of what's appropriate and what's not as far as communicating with people from other cultures. The next, we have different attitudes towards conflict. Okay, some cultures view conflict as a positive thing. They view it as healthy, and that it's healthy to manage conflict and to sit down and come to agreement with whoever you're having a conflict with. Other cultures just avoid conflict altogether, or they're rather embarrassed of conflict, and it's more of a private issue than a public. They will not discuss it with you or openly, for that matter. Next, let's go to the different approaches of completing tasks. When we think about this, just think about how different cultures have different reasons for completing tasks. Different things motivate them. What might motivate us to complete this task might not be so motivating to someone from another culture. Also keep in mind that the reward associated with a task might be a very valuable reward to someone from our culture, but it might not be such a good reward to someone, or such a valuable reward to someone from another culture. So these are things we need to keep in mind when we have to complete a task with someone that we know is from another culture. Just keep that in mind. Next, we have different attitudes towards disclosure. Okay, in some cultures, it's very inappropriate to be frank about emotions or discuss your reasons behind your conflict, or even the amount of personal information shared, or what's considered personal information and what's not. These are going to vary from culture to culture. So these are things that we want to be cautious of when communicating with people from other cultures. Okay. Next, there's different decision-making styles. Okay. Different decision-making styles is, let me give you an example. In some cultures, an official will assign a subordinate, to make all the decisions, or will leave them in charge of handling these decisions. In other cultures, there's a very strong value placed on decision making and making decisions oneself. So that's another thing that's going to vary from culture to culture. Another aspect of this is group decisions. In some cultures, it's very common that the majority rules when making a group decision. In other cultures, they prefer a census. So these are also things to keep in mind when dealing with people from other cultures or communicating and working together with people from other cultures. Okay. Lastly, we have different approaches to knowledge. This is basically just thinking about how different cultures validate your knowledge and what you know. To some cultures, information acquired through cognitive means has more value. And cognitive means that's going to be things such as counting and measuring, and that's to some cultures that has more meaning than effective ways of knowing, such as including symbolic imagery or rhythm. So what you know and how you've learned it, is gonna mean different things to people from different cultures. That's another thing to keep in mind. You might think that you know something, but according to someone from another culture, they might not consider your knowledge valuable. So that's another thing to consider when communicating with people from different cultures. So as long as you make yourself aware of these 6 patterns of cultural differences and learn how you can deal with them, then you should be able to effectively communicate or with cross cultures. That's it.